But now to break down all the news that we've gotten just in the last few hours on the administration and much more, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, James Freeman, is here. He's the co-author of the book Borrowed Time. We've also got American Majority CEO Ned Ryun, and strategist Jon Summers is here. So much to talk about, guys.
Yep.
Ned,
I want to, Cheryl.
Yeah. There's just no shortage of forget slow Fridays, right, Ned? Let's start with this last Trump tweet about North Korea and Mike Pompeo. This somewhat came out of the blue. I'm curious if you think the president's really just trying to change the conversation and get the mainstream media to stop talking about Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort and the Russia probe.
Well, first of all, I think he's absolutely right. I mean, China is a real part of getting North Korea to actually agree to denuclearization. And right now, they don't seem to want to play ball on any of this resolution on our trade differences. So I think he's right. You got to get this whole situation figured out with China to get them on the same page with us on that, to then get them on the same page in how we deal with North Korea. But I would also remind people, too, Donald Trump is the master of how he plays the media. He's the Pied Piper of the media, and sometimes he calls a different tune to get them distracted from things he doesn't want to really have emphasized. So I think there is a legitimacy to this situation with China. At the same time, he has a beautiful way of actually changing the conversation, sometimes within a matter of seconds with one tweet.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're talking about it right now, but we're going to get to the other issues of the day. James, same question to you. Do you think the president's just trying to kind of divert our attention away from the scandals that have really rocked the White House this week?
Well, I would say I give him credit for not taking peace at any price with North Korea here. He sees that he's not getting the response he wants in terms of dismantling the nuclear program there, and so he's saying that's not acceptable. It seems like if he wanted to push all these stories related to the payments off the front of the newspaper, what he would do is announce a big deal with North Korea and details to follow. So I think maybe we should give him some credit here for saying it's not working out so far.
Well, it kind of hasn't. There's been a few missile tests in North Korea since the big summit that we're not real happy about. But, John, at the same time, you got to wonder if this is a smart strategy going into the midterms. Look, there's obviously a blue wave out there, and I'm sure that they're pretty nervous over on the GOP side about that. At the same time, if he can get China to the table and get a deal made for China, that would actually, I would think, help the Republicans come November.
I think everyone would love to see, peace with North Korea. And I think this is one of the reasons why just a couple of months ago after his first summit with the chairman, we cautioned people to not get too excited. He was out there declaring, mission accomplished and all that, and we don't have to worry about North Korea anymore. And I think anyone with half a brain knew that that actually wasn't the case because it wasn't a done deal. And we're seeing that play out at this point.
Now, let's talk about the other news of the day. Alan Weisselberg, of course, the CFO of the Trump Organization, granted immunity a long time ago. Want to be clear, a long time ago, before Michael Cohen pled guilty to those charges, Ned Ryun. But I'm wondering if this is something that the Trump administration or the president needs to be worried about. What is he saying? I mean, when you're the CFO, you've got all the numbers, you've got the books right in front of you. It's a very powerful position to be in.
Well, I think there's a lot of different things to think about, Cheryl. First of all, I think we can finally disabuse ourselves of the notion this had anything to do with Russian collusion. So there's that. At the same time, of course, I'd be concerned. You're talking about the CFO. Again, as you pointed out, they didn't get Al Capone on murder. They got him on racketeering because they got a hold of his bookkeeper. So obviously there is concern always when you have the CFO that's been given immunity. But I would also point out this. I think, again, when you have Bradley Smith, who's the head of we used to be chairman of the FEC, and Alan Dershowitz saying, regardless of how these payments took place between Donald Trump and through Cohen to Stormy Daniels and anybody else, there was no campaign violation. There's no felony. There's no crime. And I would actually point out, too, the recent case with John Edwards in which $1 million of actual campaign funds were used, and there were no FEC violations and no convictions. And so if that's all we're really talking about, I think it's a lot of storm and fury that will signify nothing in the end.
All right.
Yeah, but you're conveniently overlooking the whole issue of intent. And I don't think that, so I think you're doing a little bit of a disservice there. Intent is at the heart of this.
John Edwards had real intent with $1 million of campaign funds.
Great. John Edwards isn't the president of the United States. Donald Trump is. And that's the thing that we're talking about here. So as you cite Dershowitz and the others, sure, I can see why they would want to make that argument. But the reality is you also have to look at intent. And I also love the narrative that you and others are pushing that this has nothing to do with Russia, because it only just reminds people about the number of offenses that are out there that have been committed by this president and some of the people around
maybe
him.
Not by the president, but maybe some others. I mean, you can't ignore the Paul Manafort and the Michael Cohen, but again, that wasn't connected to Russia. That was
Exactly.
Paul Manafort was convicted of things that he did well before he became the campaign manager. But that's the thing, when you open up a probe like the Mueller probe, and that's why this is where this gets tricky, James. It can make the folks in Washington at the White House nervous. This all reminds me of Whitewater and the Clintons. I mean, this all started with SNL, and Al Capone was convicted on I thought it was mail fraud, Ned, but I'll tell you, yeah. But that's some things, Jay. Once you open up Pandora's box, and Mueller has made it clear he's not going to go until this is finished. That's, I think, why the White House is nervous.
Yeah, if we assume for a moment that the president did not collude with Russia, and I think
we don't know.
A reasonable assumption based on what we've learned so far. Right. I think you would have to say anybody would be pretty ticked off having to go through 2 years of this and seeing the fishing expedition go on. Now, some people have said, "Oh, we're back to Whitewater. This is just about sex." But of course, to remind people, that was about lying under oath, and that was about a sexual harassment lawsuit President Clinton was trying to derail. That's why he lied under oath. And then, of course, there was a relationship with an intern. But I think, in this case, we are pretty far away from the Russia collusion. And I would also remind people that this plea to a dubious campaign finance charge, which, as we pointed out, has never been held to be a campaign finance violation, only happens because prosecutors had leverage for Mr. Cohen's tax issues on matters totally unrelated to Donald Trump. Never mind totally unrelated to Russia. Nothing to do with Donald Trump.
And then there's the fate of Jeff Sessions, which is still going to, well, that's frankly still a question mark. And the president was tweet after tweet this morning about Sessions and his anger at him. We shall see. The story will continue. We know that. James, Ned, John, guys, thank you very much for being here.